previously on part 1 of our North Central Arizona special. Starting in Baghdad, 2 hours northwest of Phoenix, I headed north on dirt roads into the Santa Maria Mountains. After traversing along the edge of the scenic Bem Mesa, I soon made my way to the abandoned Black Pearl mine. After checking out the expansive ruins of this former tungsten operation, I returned to the main road and continued north. The trail passed scenic grasslands before re-entering the forest and eventually heading east past Yolo Ranch. I visited the former site of Camp Wood, an old military cavalry outpost, and found camp not far down the trail in the Prescott National Forest. Today, I continue with day 2 of my trip, heading 130 miles northeast into the Verde Valley and eventually back into the forest. With scenic canyons, big views, and lots of trail to cover, it'll be a busy day. It was just after 6 o'clock when I was up. The morning was cool and quiet as the light of the day slowly lit up camp. I lounged in the tent for a while and enjoyed the view. Last night I managed to sleep really well. It wasn't windy, and aside from a little bit of traffic on the nearby road, all had been still. Around 7:30, I got started on breakfast. I had a lot of mileage planned, so I didn't want to linger around camp for too long. After whipping up some quick oatmeal and coffee, it was soon off to breaking down camp. Shortly after 8:30, I was all loaded up and ready to get underway in the Jeep. I returned to County Road 68 and proceeded eastbound. It was about 15 miles before getting back to civilization for my next short segment. The road remained wide and smooth. Just a few minutes away from camp, I climbed to a high point and had to stop and check out the view. Looking east was the wide Williamson Valley, where I would end up in just a little bit. I also got my first view of the San Francisco peaks far off on the horizon. Looking back towards camp, the view of the Sheridan fire damage was much more apparent. Continuing east, the trail slowly but steadily dropped downhill. This section was especially scenic. I continued through the burned area for a while, but it eventually gave way to green forest once again. The trail kept dropping, and I passed a few crazy mountain bikers heading uphill. The great views kept up for a while, and the road stayed in great shape. Things slowly became more civilized as I left behind the Santa Maria Mountains and entered into Williamson Valley. The road got wider, although more filled with washboards. Slowly but surely, the forest thinned out and I found myself traversing a wide grassland. It was windy today, with a red flag warning in place, so things were gusty. I arrived at Pavement and aired up the tires before proceeding. This would be the first of my 2 planned air-ups today. My next segment would be a 20-mile pavement connector to the other side of Chino Valley. Unfortunately, there were no dirt roads between here and there, but this would save some time. Despite being pavement, this area just north of Prescott was very scenic. After refilling the tank and topping off the cooler, I was soon back on the outskirts of town. Now on Perkinsville Road, I headed east where things soon turned back to dirt. This road sees a lot of traffic and as a result, had a ton of washboards. To keep myself sane, I had to air down again. The road itself wasn't difficult, it's just the Jeep can get quite noisy on roads like this. Things were scenic with some great views of the Black Mountains and Wood Chute Wilderness to the east. This was an area my cousin and I ventured a little further into back in 2015. I passed through grasslands and even saw some pronghorn cross the road. Pronghorns are fairly common throughout the west and are frequently mistaken for antelope. Continuing further east, the road remained flat for a while. Around the 13-mile mark, things got more interesting. Views of the San Francisco peaks and the gorgeous red rocks of Sedona slowly came into view, and got better as I continued on. I crossed back into the Prescott National Forest, and the road curved and climbed through Wildcat Draw. The road reached a high point with an expansive view of the Verde Valley. I had to stop for a minute and take it all in. From here, the trail curves sharply and drops into the bottom of the Verde Valley. At the 19-mile mark, the road arrived at a remote stop sign. To the right was Jerome and Mingus Mountain, but I stayed left to get to the Verde River and the mostly abandoned town of Perkinsville. I passed a small ranching area and dropped towards a narrow bridge over the Verde. I crossed the Verde River, which was flowing. I stayed right past the bridge to get closer to the historic train depot the town is known for. But after weaving through some trees along the banks of the river, I soon found myself at a locked gate with no trespassing signs. I headed deeper into the trees to see if there was another way around. Unfortunately, there wasn't. It turns out that all the buildings in Perkinsville, abandoned or otherwise, sit on private property, and the only way to see them was from higher up on the trail or along the railroad line. This railroad, known as the Arizona Central Line, runs from a cement plant in Drake to the town of Clarkdale. Originally completed in 1913 for $1.2 million, its purpose was to support the mines of Jerome. Perkinsville was established as a water stop along the line and supplied lime from its quarries to the smelter in Clarkdale. Operations lasted until the 1950s when the smelters closed and the locomotives switched over to diesel. The town was never big, but it was also used as a filming location for the 1960s film How the West Was Won. Nowadays, the town is abandoned except for a few locals, and the only tourists allowed to arrive are on the Verde Canyon Railroad. Still wanting to find a spot to look at the Verde, I relocated. On a warm summer day with temperatures in the low 90s, this was a pretty popular spot. I found a nice section and sat along the banks for a few minutes. The river here was flowing but quite muddy. The Verde flows southeast for 170 miles to its meeting with the Salt just outside of Phoenix. This spot here also marked the lowest elevation of my entire trip at around 3,800 feet. Unfortunately, the popularity meant that this spot was hardly quiet and serene. I grabbed a quick snack and soon returned to the Jeep and got back on the trail north. I crossed the railroad tracks and began the long climb out of the Verde Valley. It was 2 o'clock, and I still had about 65 miles to get to my planned campsite for the night. For the next 9 miles, the trail headed north and west. It continued to curve and climb through some relatively scenic areas. This last section through Prescott National Forest featured some more open grasslands and eventually gave way to thicker vegetation. The miles continued to tick by. In the absolute middle of nowhere, the road turned to pavement once again. I decided to do a quick air up just in case. This paved connector was 16 miles long and would climb nearly 3,000 vertical feet. It would take me up onto the Colorado Plateau for the remainder of my trip. While a few pavement miles would have been perfectly okay on aired down tires, the 16 miles seemed like it was just a bit too much. And I certainly didn't want another flat tire like last year's trip. Once this was done, I continued northbound. The road climbed and quickly crossed into Yavapai County and entered into Kaibab National Forest. With every mile forward, the temperature got slightly cooler, leaving behind the warmer Verde Valley. I eventually turned off the pavement and headed east along Forest Road 110. I aired down again since the next 2 days would be exclusively on dirt. The road really wasn't much to write home about. It sees a ton of traffic and its gravel surface was typically fast moving. I cruised along quickly, trying to make good time to camp. Past White Horse Lake, which seemed packed, I continued north. Things remained easy, although full of washboards. A few miles down the road, I came across a turnoff that was intriguing. I pulled into Sycamore Canyon overlook and figured I had time for a quick stop. After a short hike, I soon found myself at the rim of the canyon. While not very wide at this point, the view was certainly impressive. Columns of rocks made up the steep walls, and the area was covered with a thick layer of trees. At the mouth of the canyon sat a large rock drop known as Sycamore Falls. This 70-foot drop flows seasonally, but must be really impressive when it does. It is also a popular rock climbing spot. While there was some water at the bottom, it seemed pretty dry otherwise. I enjoyed the view for a few minutes before returning back uphill to the Jeep. I continued north for about 5 miles. The road remained uneventful and busy. I stayed right onto Forest Road 141, and the gravel turned to a reddish dirt. I proceeded eastbound, and the trail soon opened up. This was Garland Prairie. With views of the San Francisco peaks and some other surrounding mountains, it was really something. I don't know what it is, but something about open expanses like this get me really excited. I continued east through the prairie. At about equal latitude as the city of Flagstaff, this point marked the northernmost reach of my entire adventure. The area is relatively populated and is home to numerous ranches. I passed sheep, goats, and some other animals as I weaved through. What appeared to be several abandoned homesteads also dot the prairie. A brief pavement section was followed by a return to dirt roads underneath a power line. It was now almost 6 o'clock and I still had over 25 miles to cover to get to camp. Leaving the populated area, the views opened up briefly and the road condition soon changed. I was now in my third national forest of the trip, the Coconino. This section of trail had numerous tracks and the surface appeared to be severely torn up. This certainly slowed me down. It wasn't difficult, it just took some time to navigate. I picked my way south on Forest Road 527. And this went on for some time. The road would smooth out briefly and then enter another beaten up or rocky section. I meandered east as the lesser traveled road curved through the forest. It was scenic, green, and felt remote. A brief rocky area marked another section close to the rim of Sycamore Canyon. Past the 7-mile mark, things got progressively easier and faster. I traveled along Forest Road 538, and 14 miles from Garland Prairie, I arrived at a major junction. This was Forest Road 231. Now about 10 miles away from my intended campsite, and with far easier road to navigate, I decided to take a gamble and try to make it before sunset. I followed 231 south and picked up the pace. This trail is surprisingly scenic and travels through a brief section of the West Fork of Oak Creek Canyon. The road soon fell into the shadows. With lots of curves and elevation changes, I thought I made good time heading south. As I approached the final section towards East Pocket, better known as the end of the world, I quickly came to the realization that I wasn't the only one that wanted to camp here. As I headed east, campsite after campsite had already been claimed. The area has tons of dispersed camping spots that overlook Sedona and the secret mountain wilderness. But trail after trail, it seemed like I was too late. Which was kind of surprising since it was a Tuesday evening in the middle of a pandemic. Regardless, the light was now fading fast and I continued east trying to salvage a decent spot. I ended up on a fun side trail that got interesting, but there was nothing here. I turned around and began the drive of shame back west. It was certainly a busy area with lots of traffic still moving in and out. Just before 8 o'clock, I pulled off on a side road in the area and found a suitable spot. It wasn't the big view I was hoping for, but located half a mile from the rim of the canyon, it was going to have to work. I got camp set up in record time. Almost immediately, I began work on dinner. I figured something nice was in order to help lighten the mood. I fired up the stove and got the ribeye cooking. The fantastic smells permeated the air almost immediately. After a little while, I got some water boiling for the potatoes. Dinner came together rather quickly, and half an hour after getting to camp, I was ready to eat. It would be steak and potatoes, and for the vegetables, a nice side of hops. I sat down in the dark to eat. It was incredible. For dessert, it would be a little bit of whiskey, which of course was also very enjoyable. The evening ended up being really nice. I eventually got up into the tent around 9:30 and was off to bed by 10. After another busy day and covering 136 miles from my last camp, it certainly didn't take long to drift asleep. Next time, I check out the incredible view that I missed out on the day before. Continuing along my route, I head northeast and visit a historic cabin and explore some new trails. After making an extremely early camp, I'll spend the afternoon relaxing near the scenic Fry Lake. The following day, I'll continue east, cross Highway 89A, and traverse the most difficult section of trail yet as I follow my planned route across I-17 and over to Mormon Lake.